All right, let's do this. Hello, everybody. My name is Richard Huggins. Welcome to the WebXam Users Workshop number 2. This one will be on proctoring and activation. We got a lot of stuff to get through, so let's get started. Again, I'm Richard Huggins, and then along with me today is Dr. Bridget McHugh, the Seat Assessment Program Director. So she leads all of our item writing and web exam test delivery activities. So she'll be talking through proctoring, and then I'll talk through activation. So real quickly about WebXam, I think most of you know WebXam is an online testing portal used for CTE and FCS testing and programs throughout Ohio. So we deliver these statewide tests. Those tests are made by educators just like you throughout Ohio. They are written bespoke to the ODEW, Career Field Content Standards. So they are real specific to Ohio needs. Students participate in end of course testing needed either for graduation, college credit, or in the case of program administrators for funding purposes. So as I said, we're going to cover a few updates that have come in since the last users workshop. We're going to talk about proctoring, we're going to talk about activations, and then we'll hit some highlights at the end. So real quick updates since the last workshop. So there are some changes to activation, some of which were requested by people in this workshop today. So we'll go through those. And I do want to specifically call out some stuff going on in IT and arts field testing this year. So this relates to the 4 subject codes you're seeing, 145025, 145030. So that's computer hardware and computer software, as well as network operating systems 145040 and 3D techniques 145120. So those subject codes are still available to be in your program. The first 3 will be removed next year, from what I understand. But all of them are no longer C tags. So I want you to be aware of that, and your IT instructors should be aware that if you have a program that includes computer hardware, computer software, and the other 2 subject codes, you may wish to change those programs to use different subject codes. In the case of computer software, that's fundamentals of operating systems. In the case of computer hardware, that's personal computers. In the case of network operating systems, that would be the network management subject code. And in the case of 145120, 3D techniques, that would be the hard surface modeling subject code that you'll want to look for. So just keep that in mind, that while those courses are available and your IT instructors and actually some engineering instructors don't have to change subject codes, if their students are relying upon those subject codes for C tags, you may wish to update your programs to use the newer assessments. So just be aware of that change to C tags. Lastly, another change that came in after the last users workshop is a change to account archiving. So this basically says that if a teacher is trying to archive a student account, WebXam is going to check and see if that account is a part of any program that's not associated with that teacher. And if it is if the account is associated with a program that that teacher's not part of, then we will not archive that student's account. We'll just remove it from that teacher's programs. So that way the account will still be available to those other programs. This was brought up as an issue that was causing some problems for students that were shared between homeschools and career centers. So just be aware that if a teacher tries to archive a student account, we'll check and see, hey, is a student part of a program that's maybe at the career center or maybe at the local district? And if it is, then the account will not be actually archived. It will just be removed from that teacher's programs. So yeah, I think that will hopefully sort of solve, or at least to minimize some of the issues we saw earlier this year and last year. And if there's any further issues with that, don't hesitate to contact us. We are always happy when we hear stuff like that to try to get it addressed as quickly as we can. And with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Dr. McHugh to talk about proctoring. Okay, there she goes.
Can everyone hear me?
At least I can, Bridget.
Okay, okay. Well, give me 1 second. Okay. Hopefully that means everyone else can hear me. So, I'll get started. So I am Bridget McHugh, the director of the assessment program. That means that if you've participated in any of our workshops or talked to any of our support staff, I manage all of the people you interacted with for the most part. And we are responsible, of course, for the WebXam assessments. WebXam is our administration platform. And we are also responsible for several different like credentialing programs, assessment programs as well. I'm going to just talk you through the 4 different phases of proctoring, starting with what you want to do before the actual activation. So before activation, there's 2 or 3 things you should, or there's about 2 things you should consider at this point. So we've gotten a lot of questions about text to speech in the past, and we don't recommend allowing students to have access to it all the time. Um, we really only think that it's a good idea when you have two certain conditions. So the first is, um, are the students going to all have access to headphones? For so that they can listen to that text to speech feature so that it is not coming out of the internal speakers. The other is thinking about your actual testing environment. Is this a kind of testing environment where um, you can control sound access? So the reason we want you to think about this before activation is we actually shuffle the test questions, the order they're in, to reduce the chances of cheating. And it kind of defeats the purpose if all students have, or even just multiple students are using text to speech and they can hear the other questions. And then, of course, if there's multiple different computers speaking out the questions at the same time, that's also just not conducive to concentrating on the actual test questions that are being presented to each individual student. So we recommend considering that before you actually activate. The second is, and this is related to test security and proctoring. Um, if possible, work with your IT staff to get some kind of way to monitor what sites test takers visit or limit what sites test takers can visit. And that is in part to keep them from looking up stuff while they are taking the test. The other big risk is if they can record items by using certain sites, having access to certain sites while they're testing, and then share it with other people. We call this like item harvesting, and sometimes multiple people will do it together, and they kind of try to get as many test questions as they can to give themselves an edge. So the next phase is in between testing, and then after you've done the activation, there's another big question you should be asking yourself as you're prepping for the actual testing session, and that is whether or not you're going to need help proctoring. One of the big rules of thumb is about 20 test takers max per a proctor, so 20-to-1 ratio. That's generally a good rule of thumb. Um, and most high stakes testing will have something around that, or maybe even a little lower. So if you have more than 20 students who are going to be taking the test, uh, we recommend trying to recruit help getting that second proctor if you can. And that, with that said, though, the ultimate say is your district's policy and what their requirement is. And you should check this before testing, so that you know you're compliant with the policy, especially because they might have an even more strict uh, ratios, maybe like 10-to-1 or 15-to-1. Another thing you want to consider at this point is how much time the students are going to need the test. So we have built-in time limits. If you've been doing this for a while, you probably are like, I know how much time it's going to take. It's going to take 40 minutes because we give about 1 minute per an item. So that is we know that is enough time. We actually can see how much time students take. We have that data, so we know that that is a reasonable amount of time for them to answer all questions and maybe even go through and check, um, quickly check what their answers once or twice. Um, so granted, that is only for situations with no accommodations. There are several different types of accommodations that give them additional time or even unlimited time. The reason I'm saying check this anyway, is not just because of accommodations, it is also because of field testing. So field testing, other big testing programs do this. They just do it to a smaller extent because they have a higher volume of test takers. Essentially, when there are new test questions, in order to know how good the test questions are and if they're at an appropriate level of difficulty, it's best practice to get certain statistics that can only be calculated by looking at about 100 people taking the test questions. So, with a lot of other larger programs, they just do a smaller subset of items, maybe like about 15 extra items. Because we have a lower volume of test takers, we actually have to field test the entire set of new test questions that will eventually be used to create not just the post test, but the pre test. And that's usually right around 100 test questions, 95 sometimes, maybe a little lower. And uh, you should count on about one item per a question in this case as well. And you may be wondering, well, how do I know if something is in field testing? It's right there on about the tests. It'll say whether or not something is in field testing. Also, since it's now October, with the way the pre-testing window is, if you notice that you didn't have a pre-test available for some courses, it's most likely because it's in field testing, and so we don't have those statistics yet to create the new pretest. Um, so check that page. In addition, if you're not subscribed to our newsletter, please subscribe to our newsletter. We will announce that in the newsletter every month. Um, we will tell you which career field or career fields are in field testing. Um, So the other thing you want to consider, I mentioned a little bit about accommodations. So this is a really good time to make sure that students uh, have the right accommodation applied to their WebExam account. So we want you to check this well before testing. Now, part of it is that we have multiple accommodations that are, pre-programmed into the web exam system. Um, Mostly ones that are related to extra time. Um, but one of the things that will sometimes happen is that, because accommodations are not really one size fits all, or even like five sizes fits all, um, we will sometimes have to work with you or your school to get the accommodation that is listed on the IP, the student's IEP. So, for example, um, some non-standard requests are like if they need a test in Braille, um, that's something we need to know ahead of time because we don't typically have test forms available in Braille. So that's going to be something that's going to have to be, we're going to have to work with you to have that translated into Braille, for example. So just make sure to check that well before testing. So then now this phase, you have now reached the actual testing session. So during the test session, uh, you know, many of you have already administered a, a standardized test before. So, there is typically some kind of script that you can read that tells the students everything that they should know for the most part. So we have that sample language in the web exam documentation that you can use to read aloud. Uh, the main thing is that we want you to explain the rules and also explain the test. So they need to know whether or not it is a pretest. Occasionally, we will get situations where maybe someone didn't realize um, that they were taking the actual post test, which counts towards whether or not they're considered proficient or advanced in the course. And maybe they thought they were taking the pretest. You want them to know which test they are taking. It's very important they know that and they're well informed of the process as well. The other thing you'll want to do is distribute the login info. So we have these usernames and access codes. This is also a good time to double check to make sure the right students were activated for the session. Looking at their login information to do that. Uh, Another thing that applies to only certain test sessions. So towards at the beginning of testing, um, you want to double check, make sure that whether or not something is a CTAG course. So one of the things that we have started in the last few years is that we now have to have the students agree to have their scores shared with colleges and universities when it's a CTAG course. So legally, they have to assent to that sharing um, after each time they take a CTAG course. Because we can't, the colleges and universities, we can't share that information without their consent. So it's going to be an electronic data sharing of their scores. So they'll see that agreement right after they finish. It will load. Because these students have just taken a test, maybe they're a little nervous. Um, Make sure, if you can, to explain to them that that is going to show up, because they might just be, kind of nervous from taking the test, and they just close the window and say no without really reading it or understanding what they're saying no to, or saying yes if they don't want to share that information. So just make them aware of that as they begin testing, so that they know um, what that agreement means, and why it's loading at the end of the test session. So now you've kind of explained everything. So as they are testing, actively proctor by walking around the room, even if you can see them from just the front of the room. It's good to also walk around to discourage cheating and other unethical behavior. It's just also generally much easier to catch it if you're rotating around, if you're walking around the room, um, seeing things from every angle. Uh, One big thing to look out for is access to prohibited devices, and we'll get into what they are allowed to have access to later on. The big one is cell phone use, or perhaps maybe like tablet use, anything where they can look up information though. So look out for cell phone use. That's a really common one. Especially hard because most cell phones are pretty small. And then look out for other unethical behavior, like, for example, students talking to each other about test items. Um, Another thing that is helpful to look out for, and is also a reason you want to walk around the room, is occasionally maybe a student is ill, or they fall ill during the testing session, and so they cannot continue to test. You want to make sure that you're aware of that situation, and you use the emergency exit test option if that happens. And that will make things easier in terms of like recovering, um, and what we'll do to recover things after the student leaves. So speaking of which, I'm just going to kind of give you a little bit more information about the emergency exit test option. Uh, that is, we call it the emergency exit test option because it is designed predominantly for emergencies like fire drills, or even perhaps an actual fire or some kind of other natural disaster. So if ideally, if a fire drill or other emergency happens during testing, we are going to ask you, if possible, to close the web browser window and then use the emergency exit test option. If that's not possible, use that option after returning to the classroom. Please do not attempt to complete the test prior to exiting and logging back in. That is going to cause some problems. Uh, so I mentioned they are definitely not allowed to have access to their cell phones. So what are they allowed to have access to? So one of the main things is scratch paper, and of course some kind of writing utensil to use with the scratch paper. Make sure that it's blank. Ideally it should be scratch paper that you've passed out for them. So it can't be the scratch paper, it can't be paper that they brought, and they might have put notes on. Make sure that they are allowed to have a four function calculator. Make sure that it is a four function non-scientific calculator. Scientific calculators can actually be used to store notes oftentimes. In addition, um, in some cases, they are allowed to have access to an NEC codebook or quick card. So that really mainly only applies to construction, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing pathway courses. That's when they will usually have access to an NEC codebook or quick card. Um, Now, just a big note here, though, this access, this is for a standard test session without accommodations. If they're allowed to have access to something else because of their accommodation, um, that that's an exception to the rule. So that supersedes this, as long as it is part of their accommodation on their IEP. So one last thing, I talked about how to detect test security breaches. So, for example, cheating or them trying to record items to help other people cheat. These need to be reported. And we will generally find out about it. Sometimes people will also tell us, the school will directly tell us. But the main thing is you want to make sure that this is reported to the DTC, because there are, district level policies about some of these situations. So report it to your district testing coordinator. And then, so now you have finished testing. What happens next? I said it once, but I'm going to say it again, just because I want people to remember this. You might get questions about the assent language, that agreement to uh, let people distribute scores to colleges and universities. So you might get questions about that data sharing agreement if it is a CTAG course, and this will happen with the post test. It will, typically happen with field testing as well, if it is a CTAG aligned course. So just remember that, be aware of that, because you might get questions. Students might ask about it as they finish the test. The other thing you want to be aware of is that these are automatically scored tests. So the minute they submit it and they finalized it, they actually will get their scores. So they'll know what their score is, and that will be their final score. If it is a typical test, but not a field test, so again, you check to see how much time they're going to need. If it's a 40-item test, it's not listed as being in field testing on about the test page. That is their final score, and that'll give them an idea of whether or not they need to retest if they didn't pass or achieve the score that they need to pass a pathway, for example. So the other situation is that if it is a field test, they are going to see a preliminary score, because again, they are taking all of the test questions that are in field testing. They will get their final score once we have used that field test data to only score them on the best test questions in terms of like validity and appropriate levels of difficulty. So that does not necessarily mean that their score is going to go down. It might go up because, for example, maybe there was an item that was not of the highest quality, like maybe it had possibly like more than one right answer. If that gets taken out of their score might go up. We just provide this because it can give them an idea of if they might need to retest because they didn't pass it after the field testing window if they are a graduating senior. One other note is we do provide those practice tests for each pathway, not each course. Uh, we don't really have the same kind of like reporting features for pathway practice tests. So just note that this is the only time the results will be available. That said, um, students are allowed to retake the practice tests because the scores don't really count for anything. It really is just for practice. So if they didn't know their score, technically they could retake it. Uh, but just be aware that they won't be able to see it after that. Uh, so that covers proctoring. I am going to pass it over to Richard. So Richard, why don't you take it away with the demonstration?
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Bridget, for talking about the exciting world of web exam assessment proctoring. Um, right? Come on. Um, so I'm going to be talking about activation, and this will just be a live demo for us so we can sort of see how the activation process works. So a lot of you are veterans of this process, so hopefully we're following the same procedures you are. If you see something interesting that I do differently than you, or if you have any questions, feel free to pop those in the chat. You'll notice Angie has been posting links to various documentation of things we're talking about. Thank you for doing that, Angie. And then we will also start going through things. So with that, let's get started. Prior to activation, a couple things you want to keep an eye out for. One of those things is to make sure, obviously, that the teacher account has been created, which is sort of needed for most other things to occur, particularly for loading students. And make sure the Career Tech or FCS program has been defined. So it has that teacher associated with it. It has the students loaded in. Otherwise, the activation process will give you an error message. And just to show you, I think all of you know this. Let me get the right window. Uh, I think all of you know this, but there is for programs, you can go through and edit your programs um, on this page. Programs, or you can go to your teacher list, find a teacher, for example, and then you can just click on that teacher's program in the list, and you'll be able to see that that's a link that you click on, and it will take you right to that particular program for that teacher. And then you can edit it and add or remove tests as needed. So just as an example, we might take operations management, and we're going to replace that with human resource management, and we'll save that change. And so you'll see that that test will be added into that program, and we'll see how that looks in activation in just a moment. So again, whenever you need to, typically maybe on a yearly basis, you'll review these programs and just make sure they have the correct assessments in them. If you have a program that switches, like maybe one teacher teaches for 2 years, and for the first year they're covering 2 courses, next year they're covering another 2 courses, you might want to change, you might want to go in and change the tests in that teacher's program, or you can have all 4 tests in there, whatever works best for you. Okay, well, now we get on to actually activating tests. So the first step is to select the teacher. And so we're gonna paste in that teacher's username again. Marcus, Huron County. And when you click next for this teacher, you'll see that starting next Monday, you'll be able to activate a post test, practice test, or a save test. Now I'm sure you know this, but you might want to know what that save test is. And that's basically if that teacher you selected has any students that are in an open testing window that have a test that they have not submitted. And so that gives you a way if a student forgot to submit a test or if there was an emergency or whatever to find and reactivate those saved tests. And so if you do that, for example, the next thing you'll be asked to select which program you're activating students for. This will show you any programs with any tests for which there are saved tests available. So in this case, there's just this one C4 program. We'll select that, and then we'll select which course in that program that student needs to take. Now, in this case, it's only showing us the Business Foundations test because that's the only test in that program that has a student that didn't complete the assessment for whatever reason. Maybe it was a fire drill, or maybe there was an illness or whatever. Or maybe they just accidentally closed the test too early. So you can select Business Foundations, and that will take you to the student testing screen. This area up here will give you a reminder of what test you're working on and why a student might not be showing up in the list below. If Business Foundations were a CTAG related assessment, you would also see a note here saying, hey, this is a CTAG, make sure you tell your students what that means. And then you can also sort of specify a start time if you're not starting this test right away. So say we were starting this tomorrow, we might say, hey, I want to start this on the 8th at 11:38 a.m. And what you'll notice is that we'll adjust this end time as well. And this is what's referred to as the activation window, which is typically a 1-hour window during which the student can either start or restart that test. So this is not the time during which the student can be taking that test. The student could start really close to that end time, and then they'll have the full 40 minutes, or if it's a field test, or they have an accommodation longer to complete that test. So just keep in mind that the activation window defines when the student can sign in and start that test, or if there was, just a quick fire drill, they can also go sign back in and restart that test without you having to reactivate them during that first 1-hour window. So again, it's important to understand that difference between the activation window and the student clock during testing. Those are two different windows. And then you can select the student here. In this case, there's just this one student who, again, this is a saved test. So the student got partway through the test but didn't complete it. And we can click the activate button. This is the first new thing in activation that I want you to be aware of is that whenever you're activating a test session, you will see this confirmation prompt from now on. And this basically, we want to make sure if you have a new teacher, you have a new proctor, maybe your district has hired some new people to help deliver these assessments. This is to confirm that they've received appropriate training, they've reviewed the documentation, they have looked at our test security rulebook, and they're aware of any district policies related to proctoring assessments. So this prompt is really about just reminding you if you've got anyone new, make sure that they know what they need, what students are allowed, how to maintain test security. So this is brand new. This will appear every time you activate a test session, whether for one student or for 50. So just be aware that you're going to see this every time. The other thing you will see is if you're delivering a pretest where there's credits required and you don't have enough credits, this dialog will change and it will tell you, hey, listen, it doesn't look like you have enough credits. Work with your administrator as needed to get more credits, and it won't let you confirm. It will require you to go back and get those additional credits necessary to complete that activation. In this case, we'll confirm, and you'll notice this page will immediately change so that this student has an access code, which you can see, and we can see that their activation window is tomorrow at 11:38. And so the next step then might be to download what's commonly referred to as the testing ticket for any students that you've activated. In this case, it's just the one. So if you click on this download activated button, you'll see you can download a CSV, but far more popular is to download one of these PDFs. So you can either do one column, two column, or three columns. And that again just defines how much width you have available for each testing ticket. Since we're dealing with one student here, we can just do one column. And that will open up. And you'll see now that this student is activated to take this test. And it'll have their username and their access code, and the student will be ready to go. You can just can this out to them before they start the assessment at the point in proctoring that Bridget was talking about earlier. So that is sort of a brief overview of the test activation process. Supposed to show us. Okay, well, let me show you one more thing, which is how to unactivate a test. Say you activated this student for the wrong time. You meant to do it right away and you select tomorrow. You can select this button and you'll note that this button down here will change to unactivate. And so clicking the unactivate button will remove the activation for any students that you selected. You can then go up here and adjust that time. So we might say, oh, whoops, I wanted to do this for 10:49, for example. And so you'll notice that we'll make the various adjustments. We'll activate the student and go. And so now you'll notice the students activated a test in a few minutes. And I chose that time for a reason because I wanted to show you what the student sees if they sign in close to the start of the test time. So I'm going to log out and log in as the student. And what this student will see is that they don't have a currently activated test session. Um, and it should tell us if they're within a few seconds of or a few minutes of the start time. That appears to not be working currently, so I apologize for that. But they will then, once 11:40 or once 10:49 comes along, they'll be able to select the correct time. So let me switch back. And now I'm going to run through a more normal activation process for test takers. Oops. So back to our favorite teacher, Marcus Huron County. So the most likely scenario that you're going to be doing is you're going to be activating a post-test. And this will only show you students that haven't tested and are that are eligible to take this test now. It won't show you students that they've already taken the test maybe twice based on the retake window. And so these will be students who are allowed to take this test at the current time. So again, this teacher only had the one program to choose from. But what you'll notice in the next step now is that they'll have all 4 courses available. And you'll particularly notice that they now have that human resource management test available that we added earlier on in this conversation. Well, I guess that is monologue. So human resource management is there for that student to take. I'm going to choose strategic entrepreneurship in this case. We'll say next. And now we'll see, I thought strategic entrepreneurship was a CTAG, but maybe I'm wrong. So again, you'll see what test you're activating. If a student isn't showing up, you'll see the possible reasons why. And then you'll see the option to activate a start time for that test. And so now we can change that start time if we want. You'll notice that there are a lot of students in this list. And so you may be interested in trying to reduce the size of this list, and that's where student tagging can really come in handy. For example, I have created some demonstration tags for these students, such as um, period 1, period 2, period 3, just for example. So you say, oh, I'm interested in my period 1 students. We'll select that, and now we're only seeing that smaller group of students in this list. So this is where the tags can really be handy if you're a teacher who's teaching a lot of teachers, which is often the case with FCS and sometimes in business, where you have a lot of students spread across your day, that you can sort of keep this list manageable. And you can select this header up at the top here, and that will select all of the students that are in that period 1. So you don't have to go through and select each one manually. You can just select in either the header or the footer and get all of the students. And then you can click activate to start that test session right now. And again, you'll see that prompt, which you'll see every time. And we'll confirm. Oh, you know what? I just remembered I wanted to turn on text to speech for all of these students. So I'm going to select them all again, and I'm going to unactivate them. I should say unactivate. Um, there it goes. So we'll select unactivate, and that will remove that activation for everybody. And then we'll say, oh, you know what? I want to allow text to speech for these students because they're going to be in a testing center and they'll all have headphones available. And then we can activate them again. And so now they're all set to test. Now, when we download activated, I'm a little worried this isn't going to work. Yes, of course. So what the other change I was hoping to talk about today, but apparently I didn't get it done in time, is that you will see, starting next week, you will see the activation or the accommodation codes next to the student's name. Now, this is something that was requested at the last users workshop, and we agreed that that's necessary. So you'll see a little TTS or T for time and a half, D for double time. I apologize that it's not showing up right now, but trust me, it'll be there next week. Trust me. I promise. So that will be there next week. Last thing I want to mention is that if you forget to download these activated codes, then at any time you can go under reports to activations and download them from there. So you can typically just leave all of these fields blank. It will return all upcoming activations that you have access to. So in this case, there are two sets. So there's Marcus Huron, who has these 10 students that we just activated, as well as the one student that was needing to complete their saved test. And so if you click on this, you'll see those same 10 students, and you'll see the same options to download a PDF with their testing tickets in them. So just be aware, if you ever forget to download those testing tickets right away, you can always access them from the activations report. And with that, that is sort of a highlights of the test activation process. Just a few quick things there. I apologize they weren't showing up correctly here. You will be able on that student activation list to see what the accommodation codes are by next week. Just be aware that's on its way. And that concludes the activation portion of our session. Yeah, so let me switch back to the PowerPoint now real quickly. So there's our activation demonstration. So just some quick closing stuff, some highlights and things. This meeting will be posted to YouTube. The next workshop will just be taking a month break next month for Veterans Day and for Thanksgiving. So we'll be back on December 8th, 2025 to talk about the wonderful world of reporting. We cannot wait to talk about reporting. It's always the most exciting thing. Be sure to keep an eye on the WebXam calendar. And if you have teachers that are participating or that are in engineering and manufacturing, robotics programs, welding programs, metallurgy, that kind of thing, that we are doing item writing for those courses right now. And so keep an eye on the newsletter for instructions on how to sign up for that. Or you can always email seat-recruiting@osu.edu. That will go to Angie and our other recruiting staff to sort of talk through how to get signed up, what's going on in recruiting right now for subject matter experts. Again, we are always looking for teachers around the state to help us. It doesn't matter if they're new teachers to the program or if they're veterans, all are welcome. If you do want to email our program director, Bridget, who you heard from earlier, they are at mchugh159@osu.edu. And WebXam support, I think most of you know because I recognize your names, and you want to talk to Brock or I. That's area code 614-292-4988 to give us a call, or support@webexam.org to email us. Anytime, day or night. We might not respond until the morning, but you can email us anytime. Maybe Brock will respond. And so with that, I do want to talk briefly about the retake policies, just to cover that real quickly. We strongly recommend that you keep an eye on the ODE page for the assessments here, the assessment recommendations. These are really the same year retake policies. Just keep an eye out. Students for non-field tests can retake an assessment 30 days afterwards. They can do that one time. If they are wanting to retake a field test, only graduating students can do that, and they can do that once the forms have been finalized. And that's, again, just to make sure the student actually needs to retake that assessment, and that they'll then only retake the 40-item assessment. And if you tested them right at the end of the field testing period, the 30-day window is not a requirement. You don't have to wait 30 days before them participating in the field test retakes. So just keep those things in mind, that there are these retake policies. One key thing to know about that field test retake policy is, say you have a student in IT who was in the program last year, and they need to retake one of those tests from last year. They should take the field tested assessment, and then if they're a senior, they'll be able to retake that retake that field test assessment. It's all very confusing. But do keep that in mind if you're retesting students from the previous year, that they will want to take that field test in order to be eligible to retake that field test if they are seniors. So with that, I will stop. I have left a grand total of 2 minutes for any additional questions that you have. And let me just say thank you. Stop sharing. All right. And with that, I'll just say thank you. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to put those in the chat. I am going to stop the recording now.